There's a trait that gets praised in school, admired in business, and rewarded in sports. Yet, quietly, this same trait destroys countless high performers behind closed doors. And the trait I'm referring to is perfection. Perfectionism, this urge, this need for everything to be perfect, this need, this compulsion to achieve and experience perfection. Most people assume perfection means discipline, high standards, excellence. But in reality, perfection often has nothing to do with greatness. You're going to hear me say this several times, I imagine, throughout this conversation. Perfection is protection. Because perfection has everything to do with fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of being exposed. Fear of making mistakes. Fear of not being enough. So instead of creating momentum, perfection creates hesitation. Instead of progress, perfection creates paralysis. And instead of peace, perfection creates pressure. And the most dangerous part is that the world often rewards perfection just enough that you never question your relentless pursuit for it. Today, I want to expose the dark side of perfection. Because if you're a high performer who knows you're capable of more, this may be the invisible force keeping you stuck beneath your next level of success. Welcome back to another episode of the Scratch Golfer's Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Salter. I'm a high-performance hypnotherapist and mindset coach, and I help high performers just like you get unstuck and out of your own way by unlearning the destructive patterns of believing, thinking, feeling, and behaving that keep you stuck beneath your potential. And we're going to dive right in today. I have a story for you, a client of mine who really struggled, to put it plainly, with the dark side of perfection. So my client of mine, on paper, incredibly successful. When we began working together, okay, golf space, because you want to hear his golf. He's a 4 handicap. But in the business world, he was one of the original members of a company in, let's call it the health and food space, that ended up going public, being sold for a boatload of money. And as you can imagine, he got a phenomenal exit package, took that and parlayed it into another phenomenal opportunity with a well-known, reputable media company, while doing several of his own startup and side hustles. And on paper, he's bringing in countless millions of dollars. He has a loving, beautiful wife, 3 beautiful children. He's a hell of a golfer, good family support, good friend circle. But on the inside, he's an absolute mess. Because from as early as he can remember, the first memory that stands out was roughly 5 years old. His mom, over and over and over, told him how perfect he was. Not just him, told everybody how perfect her little boy was. Now, he was the youngest of 2 and got a lot of attention as the youngest, the baby. Mom coddled him, mom loved him, and mom thought she was doing what was best. Praising, letting the whole neighborhood, the whole world, anybody who would listen know that her little boy was perfect, could do no wrong. Yet, when I asked my client to describe his childhood, you know what's interesting? Is he told me, and I quote from my own notes on our initial discovery call, I remember feeling nervous, worried, anxious, and uncomfortable a lot because I was never enough for mom. I never felt perfect. And as we began digging into this, the internal chaos my client was experiencing, in his own words, he felt stuck, trapped, operating well beneath his potential, struggling to hold it all together because deep down, A, he felt like an imposter, and B, he was afraid to take actions that would get him to the next level because he worried he couldn't do it perfectly. And if he couldn't do it perfectly, He'd be exposed, found out. So there were several moments during the hypnosis portion of our coaching that we really had the opportunity to dig into. 5 years old, his mother telling him he can't be friends with so-and-so because they're not good enough for him. This little boy is perfect in her eyes. Those boys in the neighborhood aren't good enough. That moment at 8 years old, staying up 2 nights in a row, cramming for a math test because he knew if he didn't get an A+ on that exam, there would be dire consequences at home. That moment at 10 years old, having to give a presentation in his French class in front of the entire classroom and being unable to speak. Literally afraid to utter a single word because foreign language, obviously going to be a challenge at that age. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to articulate his presentation in the French language perfectly. And he ultimately developed such a visceral case of stage fright. Not only did he not utter a single word, his teacher had to escort him back to his desk. Talk about embarrassing. Talk about disappointing. So this was all the inner conflict that was going on, while simultaneously we saw that need to be perfect, that label of perfection, also fuel a superpower. Again, I already highlighted some of his incredible professional and personal success at the beginning of this story. But as he continued to move into one chapter of life after the next, this perfection took a stronger hold on him. He was hesitant, constantly anxious, numbing, whether it be with nicotine, alcohol, or just pouring himself into more and more work to mask the deep truth that he didn't feel he was good enough unless he was perfect. And as he was looking to step away from his current venture to go completely off on his own, one of the biggest fears holding him back was he didn't want to be the face of his next venture, nor did he want more eyeballs, attention, or the spotlight on him, because if he wasn't perfect, if he couldn't knock an interview or a keynote presentation out of the park perfectly with conviction, he wanted nothing to do with the opportunity at all. So he found himself stuck in a pattern of playing small because in his mind, if he wasn't perfect or couldn't do the job perfectly, it wasn't worth pursuing at all. And I'll pick back up on that story later on, but I want to move into really just pausing. Curiously asking you if you feel, see, or hear elements of your own story, life, and journey in the journey of my client I just described. I have an imagination you do, and I'll remind you once more that perfection, it's protection. Perfection is rarely the pursuit of excellence. It's usually the avoidance of discomfort. It's usually a mask, a facade, action to cover up deep feelings of insecurity or not feeling like you belong, are seen, are worthy, deserving, or are good enough. And I want to plant the seed now and nurture it throughout the remainder of this conversation that your perfectionistic tendencies delay dreams one polished excuse at a time. You think it's a sense of nobility. You think it's a sense of pride, high standards, and excellence. But at the end of the day, you're playing small. The hesitance and indecision you're experiencing, the constant anxiety, is a potent cocktail designed to lead you down a path of burnout, overwhelm, and potentially defeat. And it's my hope by the end of this conversation that I'll have touched you somewhere in the heart or the soul and empower you with some frameworks, some strategies to reframe your relationship with perfectionism, to give yourself permission to make mistakes and be imperfect so you can continue to go and grow in the direction you desire. And let's really get a good working definition here. You know, Harvard Business Review, they published some phenomenal work, has a whole, I don't want to call it library, but a lot of content, a lot of research and studies on perfectionism. And, you know, Harvard breaks perfectionism down into two different types. There is adaptive perfectionism which they describe as excellence seeking. And then there is maladaptive perfectionism. And maladaptive perfectionism is obviously the focus of what we're going to spend time discussing on this conversation. But in the one article I referenced in preparation for this conversation, maladaptive perfectionism was something that they framed as failure avoidance. So we come back to the adaptive perfectionism. Adaptive perfectionism, which if you're listening to this, I have an imagination, is where you would like to be or you think is the type of perfectionistic tendencies you have. But I'm here to tell you flat out, it's 99.9% chance you don't. Adaptive perfectionism, you see, involves conscientiousness, organization, striving for excellence, setting ambitious goals with a simultaneously deep knowing that true perfection doesn't exist. And instead, the quest is excellence in every action and every outcome. Whereas conversely, maladaptive perfectionism involves an intense desire for other people's approvals. Think my client's mom in the story I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. It involves an intense desire for unrealistic expectations, negative self-talk, false, urgent, and unnecessary pressure, and a lot of shame and guilt. When one has maladaptive perfectionistic tendencies, they also typically have low confidence, a massive fear of failure, and poor outcomes in relationships and overall well-being. And if this is speaking to you, I have an imagination that you're just never satisfied with what you achieve, with what you do, with who you're meeting and working with. And if something isn't perfect, you just dismiss it. Maladaptive perfectionism typically looks, sounds, and feels like this. And I want you to really listen intently here. Giving up on a task you feel you can't be perfect, the best, or win. Viewing mistakes as failures and concealing them from others. Spending an excessive amount of time planning or redoing work just to make it perfect. Fear of taking risks unless a successful outcome is guaranteed. If you possess maladaptive perfectionistic tendencies, you're overly concerned with what other people think about you and believe that if your flaws are exposed, you'll be rejected. You constantly feel stressed, anxious, and on edge, especially when things don't go as planned, and you find it, listen carefully, find it difficult to delegate tasks to others because you seek and crave a total sense of control. So some of the patterns that begin to play out as a result of this maladaptive perfectionism include procrastination and avoidance, feeling stuck in indecision, an inability to delegate, trapped in paralysis analysis, always seeing the negative or worst in a situation, brushing off success, seeing it as short-lived and unfulfilling, and dare I say, probably being really fucking difficult to work with. You may struggle finishing something you start. As a result, part of that, in fact, due to finding difficulty accessing a flow state because you're trying to micromanage the minutia every step of the way, which, as a result, leads to reduced creativity and clarity, and this continues to perpetuate or show up as a never-ending quest to please others. And I have an imagination, if you heard yourself in any aspect of that description, that your own experience and relationship with perfectionism feels a lot like anxiety, fear, unhappiness, low self-esteem and self-worth, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, lacking self-assurance and confidence, lacking presence, and at the end of the day, struggling to turn off, detach, and actually recharge. And it's fascinating. This cycle of perfectionism develops that looks, feels, and sounds like this. If I can be perfect, I'll feel better. I'll feel like I belong. I'm good enough. I'll get the attention from those I admire and respect most. So in order to do that, I set unrealistic goals, incredibly high standards. And naturally, if those two steps resonate with you in that cycle, you set those unrealistic goals and high standards and you fail to achieve them. You come up well short. So then you judge yourself. You're harsh. Your inner critic is just tearing into you. You feel ashamed, embarrassed, guilty, awful. But hey, I can set a new goal. But if I could just do this perfectly, all those feelings of shame, guilt, feeling like a failure will disappear and I'll get that approval. And round you go. And there's a couple cool quotes I want to share. This one from Brené Brown. Perfectionism is a self-destructive and addictive belief system that fuels the following primary thought. If I look perfect and do everything perfectly, I can avoid or minimize the painful feelings of shame, judgment, blame, and not being enough. Going to let that sit for a moment. So where do these traits come from? Where does this perfectionistic part of you, what's his origin story? Where does she come from? Perfectionism is a developed personality trait born out of having one or many of your core needs go unmet in childhood. These behaviors, they ultimately become patterns, habits, programs. They form out of protection. They're intended to help you, whether that be helping you gain validation, attention, belonging, love. Ultimately, and this is really the whole crux of why any one of the destructive mindset programs I've discussed on this show ultimately form, to help you be seen, heard, and understood. So as a child, you need to feel a sense of secure attachment, unconditional love, a sense of acceptance and belonging. And when you're not, your subconscious will get incredibly creative and begin to help you develop thought patterns, beliefs, and actions to help you get those needs met. And really, there's a good quote I like here by Peter Walker that says, perfectionism provides a sense of meaning and direction for the powerless and unsupported child. In the guise of self-control, striving to be perfect offers a sense of self-control. So again, perfectionism is protection. Perfection is protection. Perfection, in one lens, can be thought about a need for control. And control can come out of, or can be a protective mechanism, especially if there were multiple periods in your life where you had no control. And it could be the theme of your childhood, or sadly, like many of my clients, it can be I'm trying to think of the right word here. This lack of control can occur during an incredibly traumatic event. Physical, sexual abuse. Fully feeling out of control as you are attacked and the victim of one of these malicious behaviors, and you slingshot and super compensate the other direction, needing to control everything, because if you can control every element exactly the way you want and need it to be, it creates a wall, or at least a perception of safety. And that is often, in my coaching experience doing this type of work, where a lot of perfectionistic tendencies are born. But equal to what I shared with you about my client story in the beginning, and similar to I'll share about my story, it can also be just a result of the dynamic in which you grow up with between your parents, your siblings, and home life. You know, I'm the oldest of 4. And I really, this is my own opinion, the more siblings you have, I think the greater the likelihood that you may develop or may possess some perfectionistic tendencies, simply because, and I've seen this more with older children, older of the siblings. As mom and dad continue having one sibling after the next, you are now forced to go from, I get 100% of mom and dad's attention, to now I get 50%, 33%, 25%, 20%. Those crazy people having 4, 5, 6 kids. No, I'm kidding. But I say that from a dad who, 1 is plenty. I love my son so much, and I've only got enough love for him. What happens though is you have to start competing in a sense for mom and dad's attention, for their love. And you find ways to stand out to get that. And we could go down a whole different rabbit hole just from this point of the conversation, but I'll stay on brand with perfectionism given our discussion here. Me getting great grades was how I stood out and reclaimed that attention. I was that typical nerd, straight A student through middle school and high school. And every time I brought home a report card, I'd be beaming when I handed a straight A report card to mom and dad because it meant a hug, it meant verbal praise, it meant a gift or a dinner out with just them. So being perfect got that extra special one-on-one time with mom and dad for me. And maybe for you, it was in grades, but maybe it was winning. Maybe you had that dad, that mom who really lived vicariously from their ruined or shattered sports dreams or athletic endeavors through you. You were the athlete. They were trying to live through you. And you only got that praise or that connection, that attention you desired when you won, when you stood out, when you performed incredibly well. So you learned to do anything and everything, no matter the cost, to be perfect on the sports field, in the classroom. And again, the byproduct here is likely a phenomenal, tenacious, ambitious work ethic. Yet, as I have alluded to, as I shared in my client story, something I've personally struggled with before is it begins to also plant an undercurrent of anxiety, false pressure, an inability to shut off, this constant need to be perfect, 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 which can disconnect you from your loved ones and really get you out of alignment from who you say you are, want to be, and where you are going. At its root, perfectionism isn't really about a deep love of being perfect, of being meticulous. It's about fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of disappointing others, fear of failure, fear of success. So as we come back to that story from the opening part of this conversation, I mentioned just a quick 3 pivotal moments, 3 of many in which my client during childhood remembers just being overwhelmed with the internal pressure of needing to be perfect. Mom says I'm perfect, so I have to be perfect. I know nothing else. I only know perfect. I know mom expects me to be perfect. And that little boy put together these beliefs with, bits of information from here, there, hearing this, assuming that. And as a result, that belief pattern became the predominant lens through which he viewed life, himself, and others. And it perpetuated an incredible work ethic and trajectory of success at the cost of his well-being. His workout consistency slacked. There was unnecessary poor communication, frustration, and spats in his marriage. He was short-tempered with his children far more than he ever should ever was proud of. He was emotionally fragile at the office. He was hesitant and uncertain, anxious and indecisive about going off on his own, starting his new venture, which in his heart he knew was right. And it took a lot of unpacking. His relationship with perfectionism, his relationship with his mom, seeing his mom's intent from a different angle, creating a sense of safety, permitting himself to make mistakes, to be imperfect, letting go, surrendering that control. And what was left? Space for peace, space for pride, contentment, joy, fulfillment, happiness, the actual energy to do what he said he wanted to do, to go after his goals. And the one mind-boggling aspect of one of our initial conversations, I believe that took place on our first call, when we actually are, we're talking business, we're talking a little golf too, and a little bit of golf we talked in this particular call. I'm like, okay, tell me more about your golf goals. And he's like, man, I want to win the club championship. He's a 4 handicap. He wants to win the thing, top class, the club champion at his club. Awesome. How have you done the past couple of years? Just give me a little more of your history. Oh, I've never entered it. Why? Oh, I'm afraid I'll lose. Well, I know you can't win if you don't participate. So let's start there. Why didn't he participate? Insert a myriad of different excuses. And I'm curious, where is perfection hurting you, holding you back, keeping you stuck, trapped, playing small, operating well beneath your potential? You see, I've seen perfectionism in all shapes and sizes. Everything we just described is the crux and the core of where it comes from, where it originates. So maybe you, as a CEO, a founder, are you indecisive, micromanaging? Are you fearful of making a mistake? Are you still tying your self-worth to the success or the bankroll of the company? As an executive with aspirations to move up to the next rung of the corporate ladder, are you over-preparing? Is everything you do rooted in simply getting the approval of others who might have a significant say in the trajectory of your career? Do you have difficulty leading with confidence? Do you avoid uncomfortable conversations? Even for you, if you're not an executive, a CEO, you consider yourself an ambitious high performer or an entrepreneur. Are you endlessly consuming content around your goal without any action because you're afraid of taking imperfect action? Food for thought. Perfection, it doesn't create elite performance under pressure. It collapses under it. Because at the end of the day, as a recap here, perfection is protection and often masks a fear of judgment, rejection, failure, success, self-worth, a need for control, a need for self-trust. And this is why productivity hacks won't solve it. It's not a surface level issue, so stop trying to apply a surface level solution. Perfection isn't tactical, strategical, it's emotional. It is rooted in your identity. And one of my favorite expressions here is trying to solve perfectionism with another productivity hack or time management hack is like putting a Band-Aid over a fucking bullet wound. It may work for a couple of minutes, but at the end of the day, you still got to get the bullet out of there, clean it up, and let the sucker heal. So where do you go from here? Well, first and foremost, I'm curious. What would happen if you set a timer for 15 minutes and just emotionally vomit it? What comes up when you think of how is your perfectionism helping you? Again, it is helping you. That's not a facetious question. How is perfectionism hurting you? Where do your perfectionistic tendencies originate? Where and how in your life were you rewarded for being perfect? The straight A's, the first place, whatever it may be. Those 15 minutes in and of themselves can create a lot of powerful reframe and segues for even deeper work to fully understand the part of you that seeks perfection. In addition to that, there's a great opportunity to begin reframing your quest for perfection as a quest for excellence. Excellence absolutely embodies a full effort, presence, courage, conviction, action. Perfection is fantasy land. So rather than rewarding a flawless outcome or result, can you shift your frame of mind to instead reward action? Asking yourself every day, did I take action? Did I move? Did I learn? Did I improve? Are you moving the needle in the direction you desire rather than waiting for a perfect moment? So instead of, I need this to be perfect, how about I need to take action? I need this to be real. Instead of, what if I fail? What if action actually sets you free? And instead of, I need more time, What if you need more courage? With the strong caveat that you have all the courage you need within you, inside you right now, today, to do whatever it is you desire. It is safe to take imperfect action. Perfection, as we close it up here, has probably helped you enough to justify keeping it. Let me say that back once more. Perfection has probably helped you achieve enough to justify keeping it or brushing it off or not addressing it. Yet, you're listening to this show because you feel stuck in some area of your life. Maybe you've had success and you feel stuck getting to the next level, or you've had this success and you feel stuck sustaining it. Perfection may now be the exact trait preventing you from achieving next level success or sustaining the current level you've just achieved. Because the next level doesn't require perfect. It requires honest, vulnerable, authentic, bold, messy action. And if you're stuck right now, ask yourself this. Are you really lacking skill? Or are you trapped by this never-ending pursuit of perfection? That answer could change everything. And we're going to end it there. I sincerely appreciate you listening to today's conversation. As always, I want to leave you with this simple ask and critical reminder. Look, I don't have ads on this show. I do so intentionally to give you the best listener experience possible. And all I ask in return is that you share this episode. Share it with that successful friend, founder, executive, entrepreneur, or bold high performer who you know is struggling with the dark side of perfection. And if this episode resonated with you, take that seriously. It usually means that part of you knows it's time for change. If you're a high performer ready to break free from the dark side of perfection, then you need to take messy, imperfect action now. If this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you to visit the show notes below, find that apply here link, apply for one-on-one high performance mindset coaching so we can detach, upgrade, rebuild your relationship with perfectionism to get you unstuck, locked in, and leveling up. Thank you again for listening. Make today great, and I'll catch you in Thursday's episode.